Let's get in Arvind. Arvind, I wanted to ask you about this point because in terms of an India GDP hit, it could be in that vicinity of around 30, 40 basis points, depending how you're working about that. The problem is a second-order impact with regard to FI flows. Now, one argument would be that the FIs anyway sold close to around 18, 20,000 crores in the last month. So it's not that they were coming in, with the big bags of money and, pumping it in. They were just at the sidelines. Do you think this could trigger, further FI outflows from India? And will they be averse to not putting in fresh money? What's your take?
I don't think the FIs, I think FIs are a minor problem right now because they've already been pulling out. I think the bigger problem would be FDI. So from a deal standpoint, long-term deal standpoint, I think keeping in mind FI flows will come and go, and they'll depend eventually on the Indian economic growth rate. So yes, it is a little bit of a hit on GDP, and that'll hurt. And that'll impact market valuations and all of that. And it's hurting the rupee, and all of that does affect FI flows. My bigger concern is if we are stuck at 25%, forget the 50%. If you're stuck at 25% tariffs versus everybody else moving to 15%, that is going to put a disadvantage on India in terms of some of its, attracting FDI for some of the global, opportunities that it sees. So I think it's important to find a way to look, the world is never fair. And right now it is unfair the way the US has been dealing, but it is not in India's self-interest to dig in its heel at this point, but to find you were saying how many numbers, we can also why shouldn't India throw out big numbers? Well, what stops them from making tall promises, which they have no intention of keeping? We're not a bunch of that can't lie, right? I mean, if that's what it takes, hot air to win, you got to play the game the way it's played. Time to get real.
That's an interesting point, and I wonder what our negotiating team would have to say to that. But we'll see. Let's work with at least the hope that this whole oil bit gets resolved. So, William, even on the 25% baseline tariff, if that remains, if for whatever reason, unfortunately, there's no breakthrough on agriculture data, these are very close and sensitive issues for India. Now, at 25% tariff, does India lose a bit of its charm or its premium? We were talking about China +1, global supply chains realigning to favor India. Could that be at risk?
That's a great question. I think we, again, have to remember that the 25% across the board is not across the board. The effective tariff rate is much lower than that because the major chunks of exports to the United States, pharmaceuticals and electronics, is exempt from these tariffs. And since a big part of India's development plan is to really bolster and increase those two sectors. I think one way of doing that is to have complementary investments going into the United States that help the production of, say, the iPhone, right? Tim Cook made a big deal about how many parts of the iPhone are being produced in the United States and being shipped to India to be assembled there. And I think one of the negotiating points that I'm sure negotiators will bring up is we can invest along with Tim Cook in the glass production in the United States. And so I think the key is what is India willing to do in terms of partnering with the United States? And again, the formula for success with President Trump has always been buy American products or invest in American jobs. And I think for complementary investments that bolster the production of stuff in India, especially in key strategic sectors like electronics, that is the avenue for success, going forward if you want immediate success. And in terms of other sectors, I think one of the things that India can do is, again, look toward complementarity for your neighbors and be able to partner with them in conjunction with investing in the United States.
So basically,
the United States really does want to create a trade zone between U.S. and India and India's counterparties.
So basically, I think Arvind hit the nail on the head, Prashant. He's saying we have to strike a deal and convince him that it's in the spirit of MAGA. Just somehow convince him that it's all about MAGA.
So you just give him a political win. I mean, basically, at the end of the day, right? I just had this is completely off-tangential question, but we don't know what goes into the mix in terms of decision-making, right? And both of you, Arvind and William, briefly, you think, President Trump, of course, it's all about I, me, etc., right? He really wants to, and he has sort of led for his country at least, and he's negotiating all these deals, etc. But at the margin, do you think there is there is a bit of a sort of ego bit here which comes into play? I mean, with regards to all, with India, it's about, the border conflict with Pakistan, right? President Trump saying, well, I helped stop that war. I mean, who knows what goes into the mix at the margin and how much? You can't put percentages to it, right? 45% is because of this factor and 35% is because of that. Do you think it's a factor at all, Arvind?
I absolutely believe it. So if India put out a statement along with a deal that we are grateful for to President Trump for all the help he's given us, including in the India-Pakistan war, they can put in a word that is acceptable. But, Trump feels like Pakistan recommended him for the Nobel Peace Prize and acknowledged his help, and India is not. And I am sure it is a factor. How big a factor? I mean, there are other things like big numbers that he can boast about, but it'll soothe the ego. So there's definitely an ego component to everything that Trump does.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and glad you called it out. I was not sure whether I should ask it, but William, your thoughts?
I think President Trump has invested entirely his entire ego in bolstering employment and investment in the United States. And anything that goes to further that would help things. And anything that detracts from that will kill you because, if you say, oh, I'm going to commit to investing $100 billion in the United States and never show up with the dollars, President Trump even said today, right, if you don't show up with the dollars, I'm just going to charge you more and get the money back that we exempted you from the tariffs. That's exactly what he said about semiconductors. The 100% tariffs is 100%, but if you produce in the United States, those semiconductors come in 0% tariff. So I think the key to, again, negotiating with President Trump is his entire ego is vested in more jobs in the United States and more investments in the United States.
It's not the Nobel? William, it's not the Nobel?
Well,
it's not.
I'm sure he's mentioned the Nobel to people.
Well, I think the short point, gentlemen, is that, something's got to give, as they say. If there has to be de-escalation and it's beyond trade, the questions are on the relationship itself, which has been bipartisan, which has been continuing for decades. It needs to come back on track, and we hope it's sooner rather than later. Thank you so much for weighing in on an important morning. Appreciate both of you being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lee, Chief Economist and Executive Director at the Milken Institute, and Arvind Sanger, Managing Partner at Geosphere Capital Management, is with us. Gentlemen, thanks very much. Good to have both of you here. Arvind, your thoughts first in terms of the news, the 50% rate, 21-day window. What do you make of it?
Well, I would look at the oil markets. If there was seriously going to be a dislocation where oil would not be flowing from Russia to India and there would be Russian oil staying off the market, oil market would have gone up a lot. But it's shrugged off this news. So I expect in the next 21 days, President Trump is, trying to show his deal-making skills, and India may be kind of the excuse he may be using to put pressure on President Putin. I don't think the market expects a follow-through of the real impact of tariffs on India curtailing Russian exports. So therefore, I am somewhat more sanguine about the fact that the tariffs will really hit at that stage. And in the meantime, India is obviously working on a trade deal. And the two things come together, some kind of a deal that Putin offers and some kind of a deal that India does. And these tariffs will all be in the rearview mirror without ever really hitting Indian exporters the level that, that 50% would imply.
William, your first thought, you'd agree? That's logical.
I agree that the deals are likely to change over the next several days and weeks, but I don't believe that anything will change unless India does make some changes. We have to remember that certain sectors have actually been excluded from the high tariffs, pharmaceuticals and electronics, which really I think would go toward the U.S. helping India to reindustrialize in these key sectors. As far as the oil market is concerned, remember President Trump said that the high tariffs are on at extra 25% because India has shifted its sources of energy imports from the rest of the world to Russia. Prior to 2022, India imported less than 2% from Russia. Now it's up to 40%. So India has really shifted during the war because Russia has priced this oil at a very low price. And for good reason, India wants a cheap source of energy because India imports 85% of its energy. So I think without a concession from India to the reality of of the need to sanction Russia for the war in Ukraine, I don't think President Trump's going to move on the tariffs. Every successful trade deal with a low tariff has seen some kind of purchase of American energy or investment of dollars into the United States. And that has been the formula for success.
Absolutely. You said it, William, and that's exactly what I want to take back to Arvind as well. Arvind, assuming that this will work out, would that be a little simplistic and maybe a tad risky at this point? Because that's what William's also saying. Look at all the other trade deals, right? The US has made zero concessions. It's gotten total market access at no tariff in all these countries, including South Korea. It's also made these countries invest further in the US. So looking at the things which are at stake, not just oil, we're talking about GM crops, agriculture, dairy, and here the sort of the political backing. I don't know if you saw Mr. Rahul Gandhi's post yesterday. I mean, there's a huge clamor saying, don't back down, don't let the US bully you. So do you still expect a breakthrough in the next 20 days?
Well, so let's separate the two things. One is the oil tariffs, and the other is the 25% tariffs on the original deal. Yeah. I would say if you're talking about the latter, I thought we were talking about oil tariffs for a second, but if you're talking about the basic 25% tariffs, I think India has to find a way to make a deal. And it's very easy. India can buy a lot of LNG from the US. India can buy a lot of oil from the US. Those are, it already buys both. It just can commit to buying more. It can commit to buying more Boeing airplanes. So there are many things that India can offer. And maybe India can offer some investment opportunities that Indian companies would invest. Remember, these are all promises that will take a while to play out. So there are many things that India can offer. I think it will need to make some concessions. Obviously, now that it's become a sticking point on something related to agriculture and dairy, which is going to be politically hard, given that the opposition is going to seize on it. But I think that is the nature of a deal where Prime Minister Modi is going to have to find a way. I'm less concerned about the oil tariffs. I think the base tariffs. I don't think India is the only one importing Russian oil, and I think just because there is no deal, and because China has rare earths, China is not getting the same treatment.
Absolutely. No, now it makes perfect sense. The oil tariff, maybe that'll resolve itself. They're anyway meeting the Russians, and maybe something gives.